What started the taxi violence in Soweto? E-hailing driver killed at Maponya Mall. On the evening of August 13, 2025, a violent attack occurred at Maponya Mall in Soweto. An e-hailing driver was shot dead, and 2 others were injured when armed attackers set 2 e-hailing vehicles ablaze. Police believe the incident is connected to ongoing taxi industry violence. Residents protest and block roads. Outraged by the violence, Soweto residents blocked roads near the mall with bricks, forcing Maponya Mall to close temporarily. Police launch manhunt. Authorities have launched a manhunt for the 4 suspects believed to have carried out the attack on the e-hailing drivers. Background: taxi versus e-hailing tensions. Long-standing e-hailing conflict. In June 2023, violence between e-hailing drivers, Uber and Bolt, and traditional minibus taxi operators erupted at Maponya Mall and Protea Glen Mall. Vehicles were torched, shots were fired, and drivers were injured, underscoring deep tensions rooted in overlapping territory and lack of regulatory clarity. Stakeholders eventually formed a committee to manage operations around shopping centers. Historical taxi route feuds in Soweto. Decades-long disputes between Nanju and Wada. The Nansfield-Dubai West Taxi Association, Nanju, and the Witwatersrand African Taxi Association, Wada, have been engaged in violent turf wars over operating routes since at least 2015, resulting in numerous deaths. Fatal crashes amid road blockages. In March 2025, road blockages by Nanju led to a Metro Police response and a fatal vehicle crash that killed 2 pedestrians. Government interventions. In April 2025, Gauteng's Roads and Transport Mech, Kedibone Dialt Labila, led a march and warned she would shut down taxi ranks for 6 months if violence did not stop. She highlighted frustrations over a lack of arrests despite deaths in the industry. The clashes between minibus taxi operators and e-hailing services, like Bolt and Uber, in South Africa, especially in places like Soweto, are rooted in a complex mix of economic, territorial, regulatory, and technological tensions. 1. Loss of income and market share. Taxi operators feel threatened by the rise of e-hailing services, which offer lower prices and convenient app-based booking, attract younger and middle-income commuters who might have previously used taxis, operate on demand without following fixed routes or schedules. Speaking head taxi industry perspective. They're taking our customers but don't follow our rules or pay for routes. 2. Unfair competition perceived. Taxi operators argue that e-hailing drivers do not pay for operating permits tied to specific routes, while taxis must. Taxis are subject to stricter government regulations, inspections, and fees. E-hailing services are often seen as loosely regulated, giving them a cost advantage. Chart decreasing result. Taxi drivers feel they're in a regulated market competing with an unregulated one, creating economic pressure. 3. Territorial control and turf wars. Minibus taxi associations claim control over specific ranks and malls where they pay fees or have historical rights. When e-hailing drivers pick up or drop off at malls, taxi ranks, or along busy taxi routes, they're seen as invading taxi territory. Police highlight this has led to intimidation, vehicle torchings, and shootings. Violent attacks near key hubs like Maponya Mall, Protea Glen Mall, and Soweto Central. 4. Lack of formal integration into transport policy. South Africa's transport policy still lacks clear guidelines to integrate e-hailing and taxi services. Government has tried mediation, but deep mistrust and fragmented regulation have undermined efforts. Enforcement is inconsistent, allowing illegal or unlicensed operators on both sides to operate. 5. Youth unemployment and economic desperation. Both industries offer low-barrier entry jobs for unemployed youth. This makes competition even more intense. Small disputes can quickly escalate into violence because livelihoods are at stake. Key 6. Failure of mediation structures. In Soweto, joint committees were formed, e.g. around Maponya Mall, to regulate pickup zones. These often fail due to lack of enforcement, unclear communication, or non-participation by new entrants. To resolve the taxi versus e-hailing violence in Soweto, and more broadly in South Africa, a multi-layered approach is needed, one that addresses regulation, economic fairness, safety, and accountability. Here's a breakdown of what must be done, practically and politically. 1. Clear, enforced regulation for all players. White heavy checkmark what needs to happen. Unify regulation under one framework for all public transport services, including e-hailing and taxis. Require permits for e-hailing services as with taxis. Same rules, same responsibilities. Enforce compliance and penalties for illegal operations, on both sides. Construction. Why it matters. Right now, taxis feel they're carrying the burden of regulation while e-hailing drivers operate with more freedom. Leveling the playing field reduces resentment and conflict. 2. Integrate e-hailing into formal public transport plans. White heavy checkmark. What needs to happen. Municipalities, like Johannesburg, must formally include e-hailing in integrated transport plans, ITPs. Designate official pickup/drop-off zones at malls, taxi ranks, and transit nodes, agreed on by both parties. Why it matters. Prevents territorial clashes and physical fights at popular locations. Promotes coexistence over competition. 3. Facilitate dialogue and trust building. White heavy checkmark. What needs to happen. Government must revive and mediate neutral forums where taxi associations, e-hailing platforms, and drivers can negotiate operational agreements. Involve community leaders and mall management to enforce agreed rules. Why it matters. Past forums failed due to poor trust and enforcement. Honest dialogue backed by government authority is key to long-term peace. Improve policing and justice response. White heavy checkmark. What needs to happen. Police must treat taxi-related violence as organized crime, not petty disputes. Fast-track investigations and prosecutions of violent offenders. Create dedicated anti-extortion and anti-violence task teams in transport hotspots like Soweto. Why it matters. Without consequences, violence continues unchecked. Communities lose faith in law enforcement and take matters into their own hands. Create sustainable economic alternatives. White heavy checkmark. What needs to happen. Invest in upskilling, alternative income support, and youth employment programs for taxi and e-hailing drivers. Expand access to finance and fleet upgrades so small operators aren't pushed out by big platforms. Why it matters. Many drivers are desperate, they fight for limited fares. Violence is often a symptom of deeper economic insecurity. Public awareness and education. What needs to happen. Run public campaigns on transport rights, legal pickup areas, and safe commuting. Help commuters understand the risks and their role in preventing conflict. Conclusion. The ongoing violence between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers in Soweto is not just a transport issue. It reflects deeper problems of economic inequality, weak regulation, and unresolved territorial disputes. If left unchecked, this conflict will continue to threaten public safety, disrupt livelihoods, and erode trust in law enforcement and public transport systems.